Good morning, TFC. It's good to see all of you today. We're starting right on time because we have a very special speaker. He's been with us yesterday and, of course, today, and we want to give him as much time as we can. J. Warner Wallace. How many of you have heard of J. Warner Wallace? Good show of hands. Let me tell you a little bit about him. He's been a detective for over 20 years. He focuses primarily in homicides. So he's a real interesting guy when you look at evidence and those kinds of things. He's got great stories to tell you. He's done a variety of cases. He's a guy who focuses on evidence. Last night and today, he's going to be focusing on evidence in Scripture and on elements of Christianity. He has appeared on Dateline, on Nightline, on True TV, on Fox News, on places all over the place. He is sought after as a speaker, as an apologist. He has an undergraduate degree in design. Can you imagine a homicide detective with an undergrad degree in design, a master's in architecture, and another master's in theological studies? So he is a fun guy. Let's give Jim a warm TFC welcome.
Morning. I hope you were here last night. Some of you probably were here last night. We talked about some evidence for God's existence, and this morning we're going to do something a little bit different. I think most of you know, if you were here last night, that I've been working in Los Angeles County working cold case homicides. These are the kinds of cases that don't close, right? Because there's no statute of limitations on a homicide. And that was helpful for me at 35 when I first started looking at the Gospels. Because if you think about it, my cases involve events in the distant past for which I usually don't have any good physical evidence. That's why they didn't get solved, okay? So by the time I get the crummy cases that I can't solve with DNA, I can't solve with fingerprints, I can't solve the way that we hope to solve cases when they are happening in real time. I get the cases that are unsolvable. And so I've got to go back and look at these reports, which are supplemental reports that were taken by a detective back in the 70s or 80s when he was interviewing a witness. And then, sure enough, in the 30 years since then, the witness has died. And then worse yet, sometimes the detective has died. So now I've got a report written by somebody I can't talk to about somebody I can't talk to. What does that sound like? Those are the Gospels, right? So whatever a process you're going to apply to working these cold cases, it turns out you can apply the same thing to the Gospels to determine if, number one, can I trust the author? And two, has he captured accurately what the witness saw? So that's what I started to do. And that's how I became a Christian. Now, last night we talked about using kind of crime scene approaches to look at the universe to see if God is a reasonable explanation for everything in the room of the universe. And I think that he is. The question then becomes, well, then what do you do with that? What I've noticed in the last, say, 20 years that I've been a Christian, because I wasn't raised around Christians, I didn't have any practical experience in the church. So when I stepped into that church for the first time at the age of 35, I had never been in an evangelical church. And I couldn't understand why you guys do things the way you do them. Right? What's this worship stuff we're doing? I don't get that. I mean, is it a performance? I can get that. But is it, like, I'm not quite sure how to navigate that, having no experience in the church. So it was hard for me to and I've noticed some things that I want to share with you about the church that might help you to rethink what you believe as a Christian and how you've been approaching your Christian life so far. And I brought some props in order to do that. So what I want to talk about are some similarities. You realize that first responders, we do a couple of things that would be helpful if you knew what we do. And Dr. Bob knows this because he was a first responder himself. So I'm just going to share with you what we do and apply it to what you might do as a Christian, okay? The first thing I want to share with you is really a sense of why it's important for us to know what the evidence is. Do you know when I go around churches in America today, and I speak 70 times a year I take 2 months off, December and January. Why? Because it snows in December and January. And I'm in 75 degrees in Southern California. Do I really want to get on a plane and go someplace where it snows? Not really. So I just stay home for those 2 months. But I will tell you that I talk to a lot of Christians, and I ask this question. And I want you to think in your head what you might say if I asked this group. I always ask, why are you a Christian? Now think about your own personal reasons for why you are a Christian right now. And if you were to answer that question, what would you say? I know what the most popular answers are nationally because I get them all the time. Here they are. You ready? The most popular answer by far, probably 60% of people will say this: I'm a Christian because I was raised that way. My parents were Christians. Now, a lot of you in this room are thinking, yeah, that's what I would have said too, which is fine. It's not a bad, by the way, that is by far the easiest determiner of what you believe is what did your parents believe? Did you realize that? For example, Islam is growing like crazy all over the planet. It will outpace us by 2030. There'll be more Muslims than there are Christians on planet Earth. Why is that happening? Because they have more kids than we do. Seriously, that's why it's happening. In biology, who your parents are and what your parents believe is the greatest determiner of what you will believe. But is that a good reason to believe anything? Just because your parents believe it? And that is 60% of the answers I get from Christians. The other percentage is something kind of interesting. It almost always has something to do with experience. In other words, people will say, well, I had an experience that confirmed for me that Christianity was true. I prayed and something was resulted from my prayers. I've seen a miracle in my life. My mom was cured of cancer, whatever it may be. It's some kind of experience. That is the second most popular answer I get. The third is kind of like the second, but slightly different. I was a jerk before I met Jesus. I'm not so much a jerk anymore. He changed my life. These are all good answers. They are. But I wondered about them because I didn't know any Christians. I had no Christians in my family, but I did have Mormons in my family because my dad remarried. His second wife is Mormon. My dad's a very committed atheist. He's not buying any of this stuff, but his second wife is Mormon, and I have 6 brothers and sisters, all raised, half-brothers and sisters, all raised LDS. If you ask them, why are you a Mormon? Guess what their answers are? The same as ours. Raised that way. I've had an experience of the Holy Spirit that confirmed for me that the Book of Mormon is true and Joseph is a prophet of God. Really? So don't you think our answers should sound different than the people who believe something that's false? Think about that. Yet our answers don't sound any different. As a matter of fact, those 2 answers, I was raised that way and I had an experience that confirmed it's true, is what everyone says. If you're a Buddhist, if you're a Muslim, if you're a Hindu, if you're a Mormon, whatever, those are the 2 most popular answers for anyone who believes anything. Our answers could sound different, and they would make a difference in the way you live if you knew better answers. Let me illustrate it for you. If you work homicides in our agency, you also work something called an OIS. Those are officer-involved shootings. So I get involved in officer-involved shooting investigations constantly, right? This is where we go out after a shooting, where an officer has discharged his weapon and hit somebody, actually, and we investigate whether or not that was a clean shooting or not. So we go. One time I was called out in the middle of the night. Officer got out he was out driving in patrol, and he sees what he thinks is a drunken driver. So he lights him up. It takes like 2 blocks for this guy to pull over because he's drunk. And he finally pulls over into a parking lot, and the officer walks up on the car, asks him to roll down his window. He does, and he can smell alcohol so ridiculously coming out of the car. He's like, you know what, bud, sorry, I need you to step out of the car. And the guy steps out of the car, and the officer realizes, ooh, this is not just your regular driver. And he was right. This was a parolee who had been out for about a month. And the officer didn't realize it, but he had an untucked T-shirt, and in his waistband, he had a semi-automatic pistol, a .45 caliber pistol. And this guy had just been released for an assault with a deadly weapon. And he knew if he was caught with that pistol in his clothing, that he would go back and do a 1-year sentence. 1 year is the penalty for being a parolee with a gun. Make sense? The officer didn't know he had a gun. So this guy decided in that moment, I got a choice. I can either go back to the prison for a year, or I can kill this officer. And he decided to kill the officer. So the officer is standing up away from this guy, and he can see that the guy is looking like he should be patted down. So he says, do me a favor, turn around for me, and I'm going to pat you down before we start what's called an FST, which is a field sobriety test, okay? He wants to see if he's, legally drunk. So he asked him to turn around. The minute the guy turned around, he pulled his gun out and turned back and faced the officer. He's about this far from the guy, so he's too far to do what we would call a takeaway move, to try to take the gun away. He was stuck, and this guy is now pointing his weapon at the officer about this far away. And the officer said, man, I was caught with, I didn't see it coming. Now, clearly, he's talking to me afterwards, right? So I get there and I interview him, so he must have made it through the shooting, right? But I want you to hear what he's telling me. Now, he was wearing his Kevlar vest. These are bulletproof vests that we are assigned as officers. And I brought mine so you can see what it looks like. Now, these are vests that, for the most part, are, I'll put it on the floor. Is that okay? So we wear these, and we're assigned these, and we know they stop rounds, and they're made out of a Kevlar material in the lining, and they have a plate on the front, which is actually designed to stop, a trauma plate that stops rounds from going in your heart. You are expected to fight through a flesh wound, sorry. But if you get a wound in your heart, you're probably going to drop dead, so you want to stop those, okay? And when I first started, they were not wraparound. This is called a wraparound vest. What I mean is it actually has an L-shaped panel that wraps around the side. Does that make sense? And it's that way so that you can stop the rounds coming from the side. Let me show you what I mean. So this is what it looks like. You put them on every day. They actually have an apron that comes down, but I always cut mine off because it's a nuisance. But it'll keep it tucked into your shirt. The point is, when I first started, we did not have wraparound vests like this. And you can tell you have to stay kind of. So what we used to do is we used to tell officers when you would face the target who's shooting at you, you want to have a smaller profile. So you want to turn sideways and then use your handgun and blade so now you're a smaller target to be hit. Does that make sense? But if you do that and you have no wraparound vest, they're shooting at the one place where you have no protection. That makes sense? So we changed our vests now to wraparound vests. And even then, some officers, sadly, if they turn sideways, actually present a larger target, okay? Which is why this morning I just had Greek yogurt and a couple of pieces of honeydew melon, okay? Because I always say if you're eating and you're a guy and something falls out of your mouth and the first thing it hits on the way down is your belly, not your chest, you got a problem, okay? Now, we know these stop rounds because we test them. We put these on the range, and we push them down 25 yards, and we start shooting at them, and we move them toward us, and we continue to shoot at them, and we can see that they will stop rounds. And we've done that. This officer had done that too. So based on his experience in the range, he knew that his vest could stop rounds. So here he is, facing this guy, and he's caught, without any preparation. And he has a few decisions he can make. He could try to dive behind his patrol car, or behind the suspect's car, because he's standing alongside the suspect's car. He could have tried to hit the ground. He could have tried to tackle the guy and just hope for the best. But here's what he said he did. He said, well, I knew I was wearing the vest, so I just decided to tense up my stomach muscles and take the first couple of rounds while I can return fire. Think about that for a second. That's pretty gutsy. I think it's crazy, actually, but it's gutsy at least. And he's doing that because he knows that the vest can stop. Well, how did he get there? In that moment, he moved from belief that to belief in. Did you see how he did that? He knew that the vest could stop the rounds, but in that moment, he transitioned to belief. He put his trust in the vest to do what he believed it could do based on what he saw on the range. Now, let me just say this to you. If he had never seen the vest stop rounds, stop bullets, do you think he'd have had that kind of confidence? I don't think he would have. I think what gave him this confidence was that he saw prior to the event that this vest can stop bullets. So in the trauma of the event, he just decided, I'm just going to trust it to do what I already know it can do. Now, look, a lot of you are in this room, and you're here because you were raised this way. And this is the natural progression of what happens, right? You are raised in the church, you're in children's ministry, then you're in youth ministry, you're in your youth group, then you decide to pick a college, you pick a college like this, you come to college like this, and you haven't ever seen if your faith can stop bullets. You don't even know. You've never shot anything at it. You haven't even read the people who are shooting at it to know what they're saying about your faith. Have you read Dawkins or Hitchens or Harris or any of these, the big four? Daniel Dennett, any of these folks who are writing books right now that are attacking the core of what you believe. Have you read Bart Ehrman to see what he says about your Gospels? The culture out there right now will do anything to discredit you. Why? Because they don't like your moral views. We're in the midst of a moral revolution right now in America, and you're on the wrong side of history according to them. You have to know if the vest can stop bullets. Because if he wasn't sure it could, I guarantee you he's going to try to chase after him. He's going to try to duck or bob or weave. He's going to do something he shouldn't do because he doesn't have confidence it can stop bullets. Why do we do all of this? Why do we spend time writing and making the case for what we believe? Because I want you to have belief that, so when a push comes to shove, you'll trust in. Does that make sense? Now, some of you haven't even taken time yet. You're kind of like, it's easy if we in a certain environment to just put your blinders up. Well, trust me, the challenge maybe hasn't come yet for you, but it's coming. It's coming the first job you work in. For a lot of us, I went to UCLA. My son went to UCLA. We're Bruins, okay? We are. We're playing this weekend our arch enemies. Who said it? If I had a gun right now, I would shoot you dead. No, I'm just kidding. Those were the Bruins, and USC are the communists. Okay, so you know, that's their mascot, I'm sure. And my son David, of course, where does he decide to go to school? He went to med school at USC. So I have a Trojan and a Bruin. We have a house divided flags over our house this weekend because on the 18th, that's the day that we play each other. And we're going to lose. I already know that. But anyway, the point is, those are environments, and they were both in either the hard or soft sciences, right? So David was a biochemist. You don't think that your Christian worldview is going to be challenged in a field like biochemistry? Yeah, it is. And then my other son was in psychology, so you don't think that he got challenged? Some of the people he was learning from at UCLA did not even believe in the existence of mind. They only believed in brain. They were physicalists. They were atheists who did not believe in non-material realities. In the end, you have to know and have certainty that what you believe is true. If you're not sure yet, if you haven't even looked at the case, well, there's lots of free ways to do that. Start looking online. There are lots of us who have ministries who are there to provide you with free materials. Now, I sent you a link last night. I'll repeat it again today. I'm going to send you the case for God's existence and the case for Christianity in video form this weekend. But I'll tell you what happens. In audiences like this, about half will ask for the videos. About 1/10 of those will actually watch them. And then when push comes to shove, they're not ready. So it's on you. Don't ask for it if you're not going to watch it. But if you do get it from me, watch it. If I want to know what you worship, you have a chapel here, right? You have worship music usually, probably, right? You do worship. Well, that's all nonsense if you ask me. I know what you worship. I can figure out what you worship. Show me your calendar. Let me see what your day looks like. I'll tell you in 5 minutes what you really worship because that's what you're spending your time on. Do you guys listen to podcasts? No one does it in this generation. Old people listen to podcasts, sorry. If you want to know what I worship, pull up in my podcast. See where I'm spending my thought life. You know what you're going to find? Half are theology, half are sports. They just are. If it's Fox Sports 1, I'm probably listening to it. If it's ESPN, like the First Take, I'm listening to that. That's 3 hours a day. Now, I speed it up, but think about what I really worship if I'm spending that kind of time listening to it. I'm just like you. We have to prioritize what's important to us because you can say what you worship, it's nonsense. What you spend your time on, that's what gives you away. And a lot of you are going to come out of this environment and you're not even going to be sure you should tell anybody you actually went to school here. Depends on where you work. Depends on who you're working with. These are vests that we wear when we do raids. To do a search warrant, you're going to wear this vest. Now, when I was undercover for 4 years. I didn't even cut my hair for 4 years. I barely shaved. I had a neighbor who I moved in, and I was working undercover, so I looked like a bum. And he did not come over and introduce himself to me for almost 4 years from across the street. But then I got reassigned to homicide, and I had to cut my hair and wear a suit to work. And suddenly he knocked on my door and introduced himself. I think he thought somebody else was now living there, like a new person had moved in, right? Because the old guy, thank God, he left, right? So now some new one. But he didn't introduce himself for the first 4 years. And when I was working undercover, I would wear something similar to this. Now, these are designed so that they have you can put the Kevlar panel from this vest into this vest in this little insertion here. And it can go right in there. So I always have my Kevlar sitting in it. And I had a different version of this. You can see it's got some pockets on the front. It's got a pocket for your radio. That's where your radio goes. This is for your magazines, so you can reload. But I also have my holster. This is actually either for a baton or a flashlight. I had everything on my vest. And it would sit just like this on the seat next to me in my car. I had a Nissan Sentra. No, it was a Stanza. I don't think they make Stanzas anymore. I don't even know. But back then, the 5 officers who worked undercover, we all drove Nissan Stanzas, either white, black, or silver, because no one would notice those in their rearview mirror. There's tons of those in Los Angeles County, okay? So we would blend right in. Except for my sergeant, who was in charge of buying cars. Do you know what he picked out for himself? A lime green, I'm not kidding, Camaro. Really? Like no one's going to notice that in their rearview mirror? Dude's a redhead. Huge red beard, didn't cut his hair for 4 years. He's our sergeant. He's driving around a redhead in a lime green Camaro. You see that once in your rearview mirror, you're never going to forget that, right? Do you know how many burned surveillances we had because of the stupid sergeant? It was crazy, but he got to pick his own car, and if you're going to drive that car back and forth to work, we took him home, make it a Camaro. So that's what he did. But I used to keep this in my passenger seat right over my black seat because then if we would like be working in shorts and T-shirt all day long, right? Because we're following guys around, waiting for them to do a robbery. Because we knew we suspected they had done a robbery in our city, but we weren't sure. So we would just get in the neighborhoods and we would follow these guys around. They'd be scoring dope all day, but eventually they'd run out of money and they would go do another robbery, and we would be there to see it and take them to jail right away. So when it came time, we would have to pull these off our seats and put them on. And you want everything to be in this vest because you're going to use this to do the raid. So this goes over your other. Of course, I wouldn't be wearing this vest because I'd have the vest in here. Does that make sense? But these vests, you can just throw them on real quick, and then you can put they Velcro like the other ones. And now you've got everything you want in your vest, and you'd have your gun, your handcuffs, everything would be in the front of your vest. You have no need for a Sam Brown. Make sense? And now you could be in shorts, and you're relatively protected, and you have everything you need in your vest, which is stupid because think if you get in a shooting, all your important stuff is where it's going to get shot up. So we changed that, okay? But back then, everything would be right here. We did a raid one time where the informant was telling us that the guy who was selling heroin was selling it out of his house. He was a big-time dealer, but he would always be armed. And so the informant said, when you go in to do the raid, make sure if he's sitting on the couch that you have his hands because he keeps the gun between the seat cushions and the couch. So if he's got his hand down by the seat cushions, get ready. So we knew that about this guy. So we jumped out of our cars, we got our stuff on, and all of us who had worked in this detail had worked in SWAT. So we all had entry team experience, and so we already knew our positions. If you're in a SWAT team and you make an entry, there are certain positions. The first guy through the door, that guy is called the scout. The second guy through the door is called the backup, and that was my position. I was the second guy through. My partner, Jeff, was the scout. He was a little bit shorter than me. That's always helpful, right? Because I'm here to back him up. And the scout has responsibility for the primary target, which in this case would have been the drug dealer. I don't have responsibility for that guy. Jeff has responsibility. So when I go in with him, I have responsibility for everything to the left of the primary. The guy behind me in the third position, he's going to come alongside the other side and have responsibility for everything to the right of the primary. But if this guy does something stupid and starts shooting, I expect Jeff to take care of that. I can't be concerned with that. I have to make sure no one pops out of a door or behind a couch or something over here. Does that make sense? So we go in on that day, And Jeff comes through the door first. And sure enough, our guy is sitting on the couch just like the informant said he would be. He's got his hands by his sides just like the informant said he would. So Jeff right away says, let me see your hands, let me see your hands. And the guy's looking at Jeff. And this is happening in a millisecond, okay? And he's looking at Jeff and he's not moving. He's not raising his hands. He's looking at Jeff like he's thinking about it. And I'm thinking at the time, because this is happening so fast, oh great, we're about to get in a shooting here because this guy will not raise his hands. And Jeff continues to command him, and I'm trying to stay focused. He's in my peripheral vision, though, and I can see in my peripheral vision now that Jeff is about here, related to me, and I can see from his side that he has not turned down his patches. So he's in that room, and he has not turned down the patches that show his badge and his ID. Now, I got alongside Jeff, and I had my patches down. And Knucklehead sees my patches, and he gives up immediately. So what was happening here is that he wasn't sure who Jeff was. We look terrible, right? Because we have not shaved or cut our hair in forever. So he wasn't sure if he's just another drug dealer down the street doing a dope rip. He thought maybe he was being ripped off. So he was about ready to shoot back, thinking he's another bad guy. Once he realized that we were the police, he gave up. Now, I can't tell you how many times my patches have saved my life. As a new officer, my son is in that position right now. He's been on the job about 5 years. And when you're a new guy on this job, you will rush into all kinds of stupid calls that you should not go in on by yourself. Get a bar fight. Okay, you wait for your backup to get there. You go in together. You're a one-man car. No. You just rush in. Then you find yourself in some bar with 5 drunk guys who all think they can take you, right? And here you are trying to tell them to stop. But they look at your patches and they think to themselves, I can take this guy, but if I do, I'll bet you there's more people coming. He's part of a larger group, and that group's well-armed, and they're tactically sound. Let's just give up. And that's what usually happens. What I see happening to young people right now in culture is they might get through high school and they're not going to Tacoma Falls. They're not. They're going to UCLA or some other university that's very hostile to their worldview, and they do not want anyone to see their patches. So when they're in class and people are making a challenge, they're like, hey, you know what? I'll just go along with the flow. Do you ever feel that way? Maybe not in a workplace or in a college, but maybe in a group of friends? Back home for the holiday? You're at Thanksgiving. That's coming up next week. I guarantee you we're going to be in front of family members that are not Christians. And sometimes it's just easier to keep your patches up, right? Because you know if you have that conversation, it's going to start a mess. I got Mormon family. I don't dare even start this conversation because it's going to be my dad is going to get mad. My dad, who's the atheist, is going to get mad. You know why? He says, do not talk to your brothers and sisters about what they believe. He thinks it's like arguing about how many buttons are on Santa Claus's suit. Who cares how many buttons are on his suit? He doesn't exist. Don't argue about the details. That's working for them. He's happy, by the way, that they believe Mormonism is true. He's happy that I believe Christianity is true. He thinks it's a useful delusion. Produces good people. He would far rather live in a country full of Christians than in a country, that's, by the way, this is also true for atheists. Did you know that? Even atheists will say they trust atheists less than they trust Christians. They will vote for them at a lower rate than they will vote for Christians. Did you know that? That poll just came out this year. Why? Because my dad thinks, hey, at least he thinks there's a God that will judge him if he does wrong. He's wrong about that God existing, but he thinks there's a God, so more than likely he is not going to do wrong. He's just afraid of the mystery God, that judge in the sky. So he's happy that I'm a believer. Folks, the time for us to navigate culture with our patches up is over. It's over. You continue to do that, we'll have no... Now look, with our patches down, you are about to take a punch. You're going to get punched. You are. Colleges like this are going to get punched because they refuse to bend their knee to the culture. They still believe that sexuality, sexual identity, all those things that the culture has shifted on in just the last 5 years, we will not bend our knee. We will continue to show our patches. But that means you're about to take a punch. So the question, it shouldn't be, well, how do I navigate this kind of thing? When do I show them? When do I not show them? No, no, no. Leave them down. Now you have to train to get ready to take the punch. That's all that's left. There's no training left for how do you navigate conversations so that it doesn't. No, 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 no. Just get ready to take a punch. Navigate that. There are lots of people out there who are excellent boxers. Why? Because they're great counterpunchers, or they're hard to hit. But they expect someone to throw a punch. Are you ready? Are you expecting someone to throw a punch? Because they are. And that's why you need to shift your thinking. You're attending classes. You come to chapel. Why? Because honestly, you have to. You have a certain number of times you got to come, right? If you were never required to come to chapel ever, what would this room look like? Be honest with yourselves. I speak at chapels all over the country. I was just at Bethel in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Not every university requires students to come to chapel. When they're required to come to chapel, I see lots of folks who don't even want to be here, but they're not here, but I mean at that chapel. But that's how it is. When they aren't required to come, I know whoever is there, they're in, right? Because they aren't required to be there. It's time for us to start training. When people ask me, how do we solve this problem, Jim? I say it the same way. Stop teaching. Stop teaching young people. It's a waste of time. It's a complete waste of time. Teaching is not doing the job. We've got great teachers who have been teaching for years in the church, yet the church continues to shrink by a percentage a year in America. It's already gone in Europe. So the question is, what are we doing wrong? Well, we got to shift from teaching to training. There's a difference between teaching and training. It looks the same sometimes, but training is teaching with a test at the end. Not an academic test, but an experiential test. Why do boxers train? Why do they get fat between fights? You know why they get fat between fights? Because no reason to train. Oh, I'm signing a deal. 12 weeks out, we got a big fight. No problem. In the next 12 weeks, that guy's going to train until he's in the best shape of his life on the eve of the fight. Why? Because that fight, calendared, on the calendar, that challenge you know is coming, has now caused him to turn the teaching into training because he's getting ready for a battle. If you're not getting ready for a battle, it's because you haven't stepped on the battlefield. When's the last time you tested what you believed? Seriously. How comfortable are you right now if you're comfortable right now as a Christian, you're doing something wrong. I mean, you are. Because we're not told we're ever going to be comfortable as Christians. We're told to expect persecution. Oh, I've never been persecuted. You're doing something wrong. In other words, if you live the way he told you to live, you're going to be persecuted. And then you're going to need to train. I brought one more tool. So when I was assigned, coming out of the academy, I was assigned this Sam Browne. This is the very Sam Browne I wore for years, which means it's hard to put on today, okay? Because I wasn't the same size in 1988 that I am today. But I will try to put it on. Ready? Hang on. This is going to be painful. Hang on. Here we go. I can't talk while I'm putting it on, okay? Oh, there you go. Got it. This is so painful. This part of the talk is going to go really fast. So, this is what we wear for years. My son still wears one of these. You can give him different materials, but this is really still the best and easiest one to wear. And what it does is you have certain things you train with consistently. This is our training weapon. It's not a real gun. It's a plastic gun. It has a real flashlight on it. So it's designed like our duty weapon. And it's the flashlight is there. Everything else works except we can't shoot it. So you're all safe. Make sense? Can't be hurt. But we train with these things consistently so that we can develop muscle memory. Muscle memory. So for example, getting the gun out and putting the gun back is something I cannot be looking at my holster to do it. I have to be able to get the gun out and get the gun back without looking. Why? Because if I take the second to look down, that's the second I'm going to get shot. Make sense? So we want to train constantly to take the gun out and put the gun back without having to look at your holster. Also, we train in these in the range for what we call, just gun jams, basically. If you don't lock your arm out enough because you're in a gunfight and you're trying to run and you bend your elbow and you jam, this slide does not come back all the way because it's not locked out. It'll jam the round. and then you got to clear the round. So we have a very simple process to do it. It's called tap, rack, bang, if the threat's still there. So it's always, we train on this, tap, rack, bang, tap, rack, bang. We just train on that all the time in the range. They'll put a stovepipe they'll put a jammed round bullet in the top of the gun, and then you have to clear it by tap, rack, and bang. So that's this tap, rack, bang thing we do all the time. Why? Because then it becomes like muscle memory. I don't have to think about it. It's the first thing I do when I pull the trigger and it doesn't fire. I assume it's a jam, and I tap, rack, bang the thing out, and I'm good to go. But I don't have to think about it. I don't like look and go, what's wrong with that thing? Right? Because that's when you're going to get killed. So instead, the minute it happens, you just tap it, rack it, and start shooting again. And you do that over and over and over again until it's muscle memory. Really? Do you have good muscle memory? Hey, how can there be a shooting in Sutherland Church in which 57 people are killed? They're fighting now about whether or not the unborn baby should be counted as number 58. Think about that. We're having a discussion in America about whether the baby that was in the womb should be counted as a victim. You know, in California, after the Lacey Peterson case, we actually will charge you with 2 homicides if you kill a woman who's pregnant. Yet we will allow you to abort that baby. Does that make any sense to you? I mean, we're counting it as a human if you kill it maliciously, but if you kill it of free will, it's not a human. Think about that. So here's my question for you. How is it there can be an all-loving, all-powerful God that allows a crazy person to walk into a church of his own kids, God's kids, and allows him to kill 57 of them? You tell me how that can happen. Either God cannot stop it, in which case he's not all-powerful. Stop calling him all-powerful if he can't stop it. Or he doesn't choose to stop it. And if that's the case, stop calling him all-loving, because he's not willing to stop the murder of 58 of his own kids. Now, how good is your muscle memory? Are you prepared quickly to respond to that objection? Because don't think for a second you haven't had it in your own head, or you haven't heard it somewhere from somebody you know. The question is, have you been training so you can answer that question quickly? Because they're going to level that objection in 140, now 280 characters on Twitter. And you're going to have 280 characters to respond. I think you could make some progress in 280 characters, but have you been training? Do you have muscle memory in place? So are you going to have to stop and look at your gun? Well, I'm not quite sure how that could be. Too late. Too late. One thing I learned early on, if you're going to do this, you have to develop a muscle memory about how to respond to the junk you're going to hear. You need a rapid response. A lot of this is because we haven't spent time. You're surfing for something today. You're going to look at something online. There are lots of resources available to you online to become really good at making the case for what you believe. Yet, you haven't been looking at them yet. You have no muscle memory. I want to challenge you to change the way you do business. All I'm saying is don't work harder, just work smarter, reprioritize. All that stuff you've been listening to on Fox Sports 1, that's me, that time's got to be spent somewhere else. You might get to that, but not until you do this other thing first. Now I'm going to show you 3 things that drive me crazy about TV, about cops on TV, so that you will know when you see one of these 3 stupid things, change the channel, get out of the theater. It's a stupid movie. Okay, you ready? So here's the first thing that I see cops doing on TV that we don't do in real life that is so stupid. Are you ready? Have you ever seen this? Cops coming into a bad situation, and he does this. Ready? Have you ever seen this on TV? Seriously. Have you? Raise your hand if you've seen that. Okay, that is so stupid. We don't do that, okay? We don't point our gun at the ceiling. Look, if you took this thing out, you took it out for a reason. I have lots of levels of force I can use. I can use my hands. I can use my voice. That's the first level of force. If my voice will get it done, this gun's never coming out. We don't take the gun out if we don't need it. Hey, move that car. Get that car moving. Move that. You're parked in the wrong place. We don't do that. Right? That's not a good level of force to start with. Hey, move your car. That's where we start. Now, if somebody raises their fist to us, we have another level of force. If somebody raises, two guys raise their fists, we're going to pull out our baton. We're going to try to meet force with force. If you have thought to pull out your gun, it's because you're afraid that the force you're going to meet is deadly force. You won't pull this out until you're at that level. So if I pull this out, I'm expecting to encounter a deadly force. And therefore, I'm going to point my gun at where I think the force is. Right? I didn't pull it out for looks. I pulled it out to respond to deadly force. And that means I'm going to point it at my target, but we call this low ready. It's about 5 degrees below the target, so I can see what he's doing. But when I have to respond, it's just there. It's just one step up. Make sense? So we're not having to come down from here, because you can't get on target very quickly, or come up. The other thing we see guys do on TV is this all the time. Okay, I'm not going to point at my feet either. You only point the gun at whatever it is you are willing to destroy. Make sense? I'm not willing to destroy the ceiling panels, and I'm not willing to shoot my own feet. So I don't point at those. I point it at low ready, so when it's time, right up into that position, just 5 degrees. Make sense? So if you see someone on TV who is pointing their gun at the ceiling, turn the channel. Okay? Here's the other thing that drives me crazy. Oh my gosh. Let's pretend like this is a wall. This is the edge of the wall. You can't see me now. I'm behind the wall. Now you can see me. You got it? We're all on the same page? Okay. So how many times have you seen guys on TV or gals, and they're like a bunch of people together, and they're pointing their gun down or up, it doesn't matter what it is, it's stupid, okay? And they're talking to, okay, he's behind this wall. So we're going to turn the corner together. I'm going to go through first. You guys, and they'll do this kind of thing. What does that mean? I have no idea what that means. We don't do that, okay? We have a little radio. Hey, I went in first. Okay, great. We're not doing this commando stuff. I don't do that. If you guys do that on some agency here, God bless you. I don't do it. Okay, the point is, we also don't talk real loud. Why? Because we don't know what kind of wall this is. There's a difference between concealment and cover. Did you know that? You can be concealed behind a drywall. No one can see me. But I'm not covered because they can shoot through the drywall. You're covered if it's a cinder block wall, if it's a car, depending on where you are in the car. Because it's just hard to shoot through those things. So they provide excellent cover. So I'm not going to talk out loud when I'm just behind concealment. He's just going to shoot through the wall. And we're all going to be dead. I mean, you see how stupid that is? So if you see that, change the channel. You also will see this on TV. Okay, this drives me nuts. Oh, my gosh. You're over there, and I'm looking to see where the bad guy is, and here I come. Okay, we don't do that. For 2 reasons. Number one, if you're using a gun like this, and you're this close to have to pull the trigger, what's the first thing that's going to happen? This slide's going to hit you in the face. That hurts, okay? Second thing is, let's say you're the person I'm looking for, okay? I want you to tell me when you see me. I'll tell you when I see you, okay? Remember this whole wall, you can't see me now, come behind the wall. So here we go, you ready? I'm not even close. I can't see any part of him yet, but he can already see me. Why? Because there's 4 inches between my eyeballs and the top of my head. And he's seeing the top of my head. And by the way, those are the 4 inches you don't want people shooting at. Right? So I'm not going to give you those 4 inches. I can't see him. My whole forehead is available to him before I can ever see him. So we don't turn corners that way. When you enter a room like this, behind cover, remember, if it really is cover, it's cover whether you're this close to it or whether you're this close to it. It's still cover, and he can't see me. So I don't need to be right up on the edge of this to use it, because then I'm forcing myself into the small parameters, right? I'm going to back up so I can lock my arm out and get ready to do this. And as I turn the corner, we call this pieing the corner. Imagine a piece of pizza or a pie. This is the pointy part of the piece of pizza or the pie. This is one edge of the pie. This is the curved crust. This is the other line of the pie. Does that make sense? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use that corner of the pie, and we're going to basically pie the corner. So what I'll do is I'm going to come around now and try to make myself as invisible as I can to him, okay? and I'm going to pull my elbow in. I can't go like this because he'll shoot my elbow before I can see him. That make sense? I also can't do this because he'll shoot my feet before I can see him. So what I'm going to kind of do is rock my way, keeping my feet toward the pie of the corner, and I'm just going to rock myself toward him, and I'm going to get the side of his arm right here. I already have most of his right side, and if this was all the way down, he still doesn't have me. So when I finally see him, it's too late for him. I see him before he sees me. Does that make sense? So you'll see this sometimes if there's a really good show and they've got good consultants, you'll see it. Now, what's interesting about this is at some point I have to go in the room to get him out. And we've had barricaded suspects. They've already killed a couple people. They're now barricaded with others, and we have to go in and extract this guy, which means you know you're going to get involved in a shooting because they already are unafraid to shoot the first two people. We have to go in and get him out before he shoots anybody else. So what do? Now, look, I wish I could just take the wall with me, right? No problem. Just take it. And we have ballistic shields that we can take with us, but they're lame. I've never liked them. They're always cumbersome, okay? So at some point, we have to get away from cover and just address the target. And when we do that, it's just us and the target. And do you know what becomes your shield then? The end of your gun. There are going to be times where the only cover you have is your weapon and knowing that you're going to have to pull the trigger before he does. That's terrible. But it's true, not just for me in law enforcement, it's true for all of you. And there's times when you can just sit back and take punches. And there are times when you need to step away from cover and know how to navigate the truth in a way that's not offensive. Because, listen, the gospel is offensive enough as it is. You don't need to add to the offense of the gospel. No one likes the gospel. Have you noticed that? The gospel is hard. It says you are a sinner in need of a Savior. Whatever you've been doing, however you've been living, it has not been pleasing God. No one seeks after God. That's the gospel. You think you've got a good life? I got a partner. He always says to me, Jim, we're good people. If there's a good God, we'll be in a good heaven. I said, Rick, I wish I just worshiped a good God. But if he has all the power to create everything from nothing, he certainly has the power to eliminate imperfection. I do not love and worship a good God. I love and worship a perfect God. He is morally perfect. He can also eliminate moral imperfection. Are you perfect, Rick? Because the standard's not good. If that was it, we'd all be, who needs God? The standard is moral perfection. And he did not like hearing that. It's offensive. I can't add to the offense, but I have to be bold enough to step away from the cover. And why do I do that? Because I think I know how to answer his objections. No matter what Rick says to me, I know there's an answer, and I've probably already thought about it. I've probably answered it and practiced over and over and over again. Look, we have 2 minutes. I'm going to give you a tool, a simple tool. Why is it that when you're in front of strangers, you hardly ever talk about the gospel? Think about it. You're going to be in front of strangers. I'm going to tell you what I do. This is how bad I am. I will teach an evangelism class and fly someplace. I flew to Alaska one time to teach an evangelism class in Anchorage, Alaska. And when I got there, do you know how I went home? I put in my headphones first before I get on the plane. Because I don't want to talk to anybody. No one talks to you if you have your headphones on. Have you ever noticed that? That's the way sometimes we are as Christians. We would rather not get in these conversations. Really? I'm going to give you a simple tool. As I take off this gut-killing Sam Brown. Oh, I feel so much better. I have a friend who does this with every stranger. He has a simple question, and it starts every conversation. It's become his muscle memory. I want to share it with you. Try it. It works every time. Are you ready? No matter who he's standing next to, no matter who he's next to, no matter where he's at, if he's at a restaurant, wherever he's at, he will simply ask the person standing next to him, hey, what do you think happens when you die? That's it. He asked that question. Do you see how fast I asked it? Do you recognize that most of the reasons why we don't share what we believe is because we're afraid of the first 30 seconds? How do I start this conversation? How do I even get it going? I don't even know how to, I'm waiting for an opportunity. I'm waiting for the door to open. It never seems to open. Don't wait for it to open. Get out from behind cover. Hey, what do you think happens when you die? You're going to get only one of 3 kinds of answers. And by the way, those answers will diagnose where that person is. Oh, I think you go back in the dirt. Nothing happens when you die. Okay, well, he probably holds a secular or atheist worldview. Okay, now you know where to start. Well, why do you think that? Or he's going to say, well, I think you're reincarnated, I get a lot of like New Age answers to that question. Like, oh, I think you probably have, if you lived a good life, okay, well, who's the karma judge? You believe in karma? Okay, I get it, but that means there would have to be a judge that would judge what's good karma and what's bad karma. See, they actually do believe in God, even when they deny believing in God, because you have to have a karma judge for karma. Or they might say, well, I believe in heaven and hell. Doesn't mean they're a Christian. They might even say they were raised as a Christian. Doesn't even mean they hold Orthodox Christian views. You can still have a conversation with that person, but it starts by getting out from behind cover and asking the first question. What do you think happens when you die? It's a simple approach. And because I know there's only 3 ways to answer it, I've simply mastered all 3 ways to respond to those 3 answers. So it gives you a way to master, so you have muscle memory. That's what you need, right? Muscle memory. So as I'm leaving here with you today, I want to just encourage you. Do something. What we do is we graduate students every year from colleges all over America who just go off and, I think, forget why we're here. You're called to something. You have a duty. You can't just drive around in your patrol car. I'm not going to answer any calls, but I sure look good in this uniform. No, you got to do something with this. This is the cure for what's killing everyone. What kind of a person knows the cure for cancer but refuses to share it? This is the cure for what's going to send everyone into eternity separated from God. What kind of person doesn't share that? Let's pray. Father, thank you for providing us a place to even talk about this, for what you're doing here at a mighty college, standing tall for what you've taught us. Help us to remain the college we are today, the people we are today. Help us to remember that there's a connection between what we believe, why we believe it, and how we end up behaving. Help us, Father, to behave in a way that honors you. Help us to share the truth and to actually defend it the way you've commanded us to defend it. We pray this in your precious name. And everyone here says, before you go, coldcasechristianity.com/resources. Cold Case Christianity, that's my first book, coldcasechristianity.com/resources. I will send you the entire case for God's existence, for Christianity, and for the resurrection. All right? Thanks, guys.